Hello, friends. This is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today we're doing something for the very first time on the Checking In show, which is going back and checking back in with someone, and that person is Marc Gallagher. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm very well. Very pleasantly surprised that you had me back. Like I thought, like for the first guest you want to bring back, it would be someone a bit more higher profile than me. It reminds me of the times when I once did a workshop at World of Ukes in Carlisle, and there was a series of posters of people giving workshops. There was Manitoba Hal, Elizabeth Pfeiffer, Katie Vernon, and then myself. And I just took a picture of it and I said, "Which one of these things is not like the other?"
It's one of those things. We all have imposter syndrome, right? Especially in music. But just to prove that there's no reason you should have imposter syndrome, why don't you kick us off with a tune?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll do a new one from the new record. It's called "Admire from Afar." It's about someone I had a crush on at work a few years ago. As I clock in the stage, I'm morale's feeling low. My mood's enlightened when you say hello, 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 hello. I savor the sight of you when you walk by. A conscious effort made that don't catch your eye, your eye, your eye, your eye. To see the face of summer light, the rumble when you smile. To see the dungarees, highlight your quirky style. To fantasize about a life that could be ours. But this is real life, so for now I'll just admire from afar. To hear your voice in its calm and dulcet tones, with eyes so pure, you never are alone, 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 alone. To hear your name called, to fill with butterflies, the anxiety inbuilt to me turns into a hide, a hide, a hide, a hide. I wish that I could treat you in a way that you deserve. I want to talk for hours and the sheer voice is heard. Wish I could gaze at lying underneath the stars. But this is real life, so for now I'll just admire from afar. I've seen your other flames can feel the chemistry. I wish that I could hang, but they're in another league, a league, a league, a league. I want to make a move, mine just getting in the way. Can't hold a conversation, I'm worried what to say, to say, to say, to say. Can punch above the weights, I cannot kid myself. I love to meet your standards, but it's something I can't tell. If only one day that I could raise that bar. But this is real life, so for now I'll just admire from afar.
And that tune was off of Mark's newest record, which just came out, known as Cartoon Physics. Mark, can you tell us just a little bit about the record in general, and what you're trying to present on this new album?
So in terms of like what the record's made up of, I like to describe it in terms of what it is as like it's 7 tracks, so it's awkward in terms of its length. It's like either a big EP or like a micro album, depending on what perspective you
I
want
feel
to
like
go
that's
down.
the perfect space to be right now. Like just straddle the two lines.
Yeah, so the way it worked was in 2019, I think it was, I had my album Songs from a Happy Winter. I had like this the concept in mind for me of right, I can go travel Europe from December to February and write an album, and I had that concept in mind. But there were a bunch of songs that I had written around about 2018 that I, kind of had to put on the shelf in favor of this concept. So that's kind of where Cartoon Physics comes from. It's kind of revisiting these older songs. It's my newest release, but these are older songs than on the one prior. It's a confusing cycle. But I mixed that in terms of its sort of style. It was like my first foray into home recording. I just wanted to visit a place of simplicity from my last album, which was properly recorded in a nice studio in Rochdale. That sounds kind of oxymoronic for, Rochdale is not the nicest of towns in England, but it's a lovely little space, and I recorded a full album, full band there. So I wanted to kind of just depart from that a little bit and just go back to sort of a simplistic element.
Yeah, I think you captured that really well in there. But the funny thing is, to me, if I turned on this record, and this goes for so many albums these days, I would never on the back of my mind be like, this is someone in their room at home with a microphone recording this. I mean, I think that's generally the goal when you're producing a record at home, is that it doesn't scream home produced, unless you're in like the shoegaze lo-fi world, and then maybe that's a badge of honor to an extent. Now, you had mentioned before that the tunes on this record actually predate the ones from your previous record. You're a rather prolific songwriter, to say the least. You're always churning out new tunes. But when you decided to make this album, what was your process for sort of like calling the songs that you had and bringing them back in, and which ones made the cuts? And did you end up doing rewrites in the songwriting process when you were in pre-production, or were these already mostly fully formed ideas that you just needed to get on tape?
So before I recorded Songs from Happy Winter, I kind of had the idea of recording both albums at once. I had the Happy Winter stuff, and I had what I just called Other Album. And in terms of
I think the new title's much better, Mark.
Oh, thank you. So I just had these two lists, and then in terms of financial viability, I thought, right, I'll just do first album first, and then I'll cross the other bridge when I get to it, rather than try and do a full double album thing. So in terms of calling on the song, it was just, I had the list of songs I liked and I wanted to kind of revisit. I didn't have to do much in terms of like rewriting, because normally I'm relatively precious when it comes to my songs, in the once it's written, it's generally it. Save for like the shifting of a couple of notes in places or a couple of words. Honestly, it usually sticks to what it is in its inception when I initially write it. So as for what I wanted to re-record for this album, well, this micro album or whatever you want to call it, what I decided was, I knew I was going to go into a home recorded thing, and I wanted to do stuff that would sort of lend itself to the acoustic band arrangement. And there were some songs that I knew I wanted to kind of save for a bit later, with respect to like, I can make a full band thing out of this, and I can't currently do that in my childhood home.
Yeah, it's tough, certainly. Because when these songs don't just come fully arranged out of your brain, I assume, and ready to hit tape. So can you walk us through a little bit of the process of what goes on in between the conception of just writing a song as a general framework, and before we hit the big red button and throw it down? What goes on in the middle there?
I'm fortunate enough that I grew up as a bit of a multi-instrumentalist. Ukulele is very much my main instrument now, but as I was a teenager, I grew up playing piano, guitar, bass, and some other things. So I was quite comfortable in that, even though I'm used to playing these songs just as solo uke and vocals, I kind of understood what kind of things I wanted going on in my head. And because I had the aptitude on my other instruments, I knew that I could, on occasion, it would just be a case of picking them up and working through parts myself, often based on the same chord, or bass, working through your various bass lines and what have you. So I was fine with it. I didn't have too much with respect to like intricately planning out and arranging my songs. I just kind of already had the key elements there, and I could just kind of revisit and touch stuff up, in my own time, pre-production, before actually hitting record. I just ironing out some of the creases in some parts, but a lot of it kind of came just down to recording itself. And then occasionally there'd be some choices you'd make, and you'd have ideas of like, oh, what if we tried this? And there was so much of it. I didn't plan on using baritone uke in the record until I was like in the middle of recording it, and then I just went for it. I just sort of felt it, tried peppering stuff in as and where appropriate, and it kind of, it just kind of all fell into place for me. So I was quite lucky in that regard.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, and that's a joy of being an instrumentalist, and also sometimes a danger. I feel as an instrumentalist who records at home is that sometimes you get a little overzealous being able to play most of the instruments. Um, I know I find myself cutting more things out of recordings than I do leaving in half the time, and go, maybe just basic is okay. And it's when you were making the record, you essentially produced this album yourself as well, right?
Indeed, yeah. It was my first foray into home recording, and it's interesting because I'm a sound engineer at university. I studied music production, and the reason why it was my first go at it was because during my uni years and when I was in sixth form before that, I'd used my college's nice facilities. And it always confused me because my fellow students would start building up their home recording setups like while they were in uni, and I never saw the point in it because we had several tens of thousands of dollars worth stuff here.
Right,
So
right.
I never kind of forayed into that. And then when it came to Songs from Happy Winter, I just hired a nice space for it. It was during the pandemic that I was starting to make a lot more of my video content that you see online, things like my collaborations and my weekly covers. So it was from there that I decided. Also, the budgetary restraints that come with losing a year and a half of work. That was also a large factor into why I wanted to home record this one. But it was nice just going into that sort of that simplicity, cartoon physics, looking with that very Looney Tunes, Chuck Jones aesthetic, trying to bring that simplicity element, and I thought it was especially fitting in like my childhood home, as I mentioned.
Certainly. I mean, with that, before we get too much into the recording process of this, 'cause I actually do want to talk to you about that. Can we hear another tune from the record?
Yeah, sure. This one is a bit of a sadder tune, and this is one that had a bit of a different recording process to everything else. It's a song that I wrote during the course of pandemic and during the course of like as lockdown was lifting, and it's about like loneliness and toxic productivity. It's called "Lockdown My Whole Life." Gather around the TV, the call is made. These four walls and a ceiling is where we're taught to stay. Shut the door, lay my head down tonight. I feel like I've been locked down my whole life. Everyone's running and cooking and learning a new language. Friends connect on Zoom games. I'm feeling the new normal, feeling lost and disadvantaged as I'm under my duvet. Concerts move online, no one's tuning into mine. I feel like I've been locked down my whole life. Starts to open up, the towns are drunk and merry, and the smiles they are glistening for invitations away. I never hear from any, seems like nobody missed me. You'll never know what you got till you're on the other side. I realize I've been locked down my whole life.
And I was locked down my whole life. And Mark, you had mentioned before the break that that was actually kind of the oddball in the recording process for this one. So what's so unique about this tune on the album?
When I recorded this, I wrote it and I was in a bit of a sad place because it's about loneliness, which is something I struggle with a lot, and toxic productivity. And I had written and I recorded a video of this song, which I put out around about the time I had written it, which was in the summer of 2020. And in terms of my initial plan for recording it, I knew arrangement-wise I wanted it to just be solo uke and voice, as opposed to having any backing elements to it. But in terms of like the emotion of the performance, I knew I wasn't going to be able to recreate what I had in the video I initially uploaded. And quite frankly, I didn't want to go back to that place. So I just took the audio from that video I did, which is just a one mic recording. And it's super lo-fi because I'm recording it and I'm sat in like this leather chair and you can hear the crinkle, the movement of the leather and my breathing, and it's very lo-fi and very intimate. But in terms of like the emotion of the performance, I knew it was the better take and I wouldn't be able to properly recreate that.
Yeah. And you know, when you're in the studio, that's always such a consideration, that towing the line between, hey, can we capture this better sonically, or is the performance just that good that we need to let it be?
I love that. When I studied music tech, like before I went to university, my tutor, Mr. Prentice, was amazing, and I remember sort of mentioning I was recording one thing and I did vocals and it clipped horribly. It was constantly peaking, and I mentioned it, but I also when I did the same thing a few takes later, you know, with the gain down, not clipping, I didn't quite have the same performance to it. And, you know, he mentioned, yes, Mark, you made the right choice going for the better performance. And there are countless examples in popular music where there are errors recording wise, but and I just love how that kind of contributes and you can get the better performance, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and it makes it so much more human to me as well. You know, we're always going for a polished product to put something out, but sometimes overly polished loses some of that emotionality that the songs can give us. Now, you're saying this was the one that you did with a single mic on the record, but what was sort of the process, and what mics are you using? What's in your mic locker for the rest of this?
Vast majority of the stuff I had was my Ear Trumpet Labs Louise, and I've also got the Edwina, which is the little smaller one that you might have seen in some of my other videos. Outside of that, I also used an AKG C414, and as far as I'm aware, I think it was just those, because I'm in Manchester as I'm recording this, but I went to my childhood house of my mum's place in Nantwich, about 50 miles south of here, and it was a case of just bringing a few bags of whatever I could get hold of. So I had a relatively smaller setup. I didn't have as much choice. That kind of contributed to it. In terms of my general process, the way I like to think of the records as being, and the same kind of process I had for my last album, is sonically I want it to be like, here's Mark in the middle with his uke, and then you've got everything else sort of behind him, the accompaniment. So my uke, I wanted to capture it in a lot of detail because it's so easy to kind of, for those to get lost and then to be treated as backing instruments in other arrangements. Yeah. For me, I recorded uke as mid-side. So I took my HML Labs Edwina, the main mic. I took my C414, had that in a figure 8 pattern. So instead of it, so figure of 8 pattern means it's sort of he is directly in front, he is directly in the back. So I placed that to the side. So you've got the front, and then I've got these sides. So I've just got a large area for my uke. I then had the Louise about 6 to 8 feet at the back of the room, and that was just acting as an ambient mic. And then in addition, I also DI'd the uke just to give an extra bit of piezo thickness, just so, and it just utilized all 4 channels on my interface so I could get as full a uke sound as possible. And
have the options when you're mixing too, because I know to a lot of people it probably seems a bit silly to take the the line out from a piezo pickup because it's not really an accurate representation of the sound, but sometimes it can shore things up so much, especially in the lower end in there that mics just don't quite capture.
Agreed. I never use it as just just the source, but I would always use it in terms of like a reinforcement, a filling in. That's the way I usually kind of approach that.
Yeah, because I do the same on upright bass sessions. I always take a line out, although it's maybe we're running like a huge low pass filter on it, so we're just getting those big thick notes that are sometimes too mushy for the microphones. And but then if you listen to it in isolation, it's terrible. But when it's mixed in with a nice stereo pair in front, it's this huge sound. And I think that goes to the point, maybe a little bit of what you're making is like having those options in your sonic palette when you go to mix, having four separate lines to work with, and to be able to. So if you're just setting up one mic in front of the uke, that's what you get. There's not much you can do. With mid-side miking, you get that really nice room tone in there as well because you're pulling from the sides and having the room mic as well. So you have a lot of latitude to make decisions later on about the sound of your instrument as opposed to being stuck with, this is it.
Very much so. It was, granted, it does have those elements, but I very much approached it from the standpoint of, let's just make a larger. I didn't use it much in the sense of trying to make choices. I used it as more just these are all contributing their various pieces to making this overall quite large sounding uke.
Yeah, make the tiny instrument huge.
That's very much my goal.
And how about everything else on the record, vocals and all that?
I recorded uke first, strictly to a click. Then it was bass was my next one, and I simply just DI'd that. I didn't bring my amp with me, and with electric bass you can kind of get away with that.
It's crazy what you can do in the box these days with electric bass. Like,
yeah,
you don't need an amp at all.
Otherwise, in terms of things like percussion, so my percussion was all sort of. I'm not a drummer by any means, so I did things like cajon at home, which was just a front and back, and I treated them as like a kick and snare respectively. So I had those, just a couple of cadenzas. It was I think it was the 414 on the back, and then my Edwina on the front to capture the snare rattle. But what I also did a lot of was when I play live sometimes, what will happen is I'll be plugging in and I will sort of hit a roundabout beneath where the bridge is. So I'll to create sort of like a pseudo kick drum thing, something like that kind of thickness. And to sort of contribute and add a bit of percussion, I made my pseudo kick drum, and I just uke plugged in, have it sat on my lap, and I just be
yeah.
That was which is how I kind of like accomplished that. So it was one percussion element. Other than that, I also had things like egg shaker and tambourine, which are just using this. It was quite roomy when I did those. Guitar and baritone uke were very much, they were all very much done on just a single mic setup. I think it was the Louise or the Edwina, just on those, because I treated those the same way that other artists and producers would treat the uke in bigger band setups. I treated that, it's just filling a little bit in. I wasn't going all out with it. Vocals was done on the Edwina, and because I was aware of like room tone, what I did is I set up a corner of my room, and I took a sort of a large wolf blanket or two, and I hung that on a couple of mic stands. So I just had this sort of deadening dampening. My mic was facing me, and it had its back to the dampening. So I just sang a lot into that, and I had that space. But my recording was very much done sort of based on an instrument per day kind of thing. Right, first one was uke day, then it was bass day, percussion day, etc. Vocals, last one I did, and it was just tough navigating it around because I was at my home with 6 dogs and my mother and my sister, and navigating around their schedules and around the dog barking.
Yeah, that is the bane of home recording right there, is dealing with noise, because we don't have soundproof studios. I can't tell you the number of takes I've had ruined by a car driving by. So I'm always right in front of I'm sandwiched between two very busy streets. So I maybe get 2 minutes of silence at a time to to cut things. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I can imagine entirely. I remember my mother was working night, and as I was doing Vauxhall Lonely Valentine, I just heard a bit of like banging on the wall, as it were. Mark, please.
Please stop.
So,
Please.
oh God, yeah. The sacrifice I made for my art.
And speaking of art, the album cover is really cool. I'm a huge fan of just album and sheet music art in general, music related art. And who designed that?
That was done by Jake Smithies. I had the idea of cartoon physics. I came across that title, that term, years ago. I was on a little Wikipedia tangent and I found the term cartoon physics, the idea that the laws of physics can be manipulated for cartoon effect. Examples like you don't realize that you are falling off a cliff until you look down and then you start falling.
Right.
That sort of thing. And I knew I wanted to call like an EP something along those lines, and I had the idea, that art style in mind, the idea of me being off a cliff, and then in that moment of oh dear, I'm about to fall, that moment of surprise, and I knew I wanted to go with Jake Smithies for that design. Jake Smithies, who's done many things in the uke world. He's also the bassist of Dead Man's Uke as well. I knew I wanted to go with him mainly because he had a series of illustrations and cards based around sort of like the Grand Canyon and sort of like this cowboy spaghetti western style thing. So it's from there that I knew he'd probably be the right sort of fit. I told him it's very much Chuck Jones-esque, Looney Tunes scene. I want this to be a still from the Wile E. Coyote cartoons. I want it to be that sort of vibe. And when I was bouncing the ideas off him, luckily Jake's a massive fan of Chuck Jones, so he was able to pull up the design, and it was perfect.
It's so perfect.
Absolutely what I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've told you before. Jake did my logo. He's done numerous projects with me, and he's just such a master illustrator. But especially of that old American style of illustration, that like 30s through late 50s kind of illustration. And when I saw your cover, it was just I couldn't imagine that it would have been someone else that drew that besides Jake.
I agree entirely. I know exactly what you mean. With Jake, he's very known around the uke world with his illustration, done so much there. And also he's very he's got such a distinct look. You can tell it's a Jake Smithies kind of drawing, and very much like that older style. It's perfect for you, totally. There was no one else that I wanted for that specific aesthetic that I had in mind for that album. I'm so chuffed with it.
Yeah, it's just like you find the right person for the job, give them all your money, and the product will be beautiful. Mark, would you mind playing us one final tune from the album?
Yeah, sure. This is the last song on the EP, and it's probably my favorite. It's one that I wrote couple years ago. I went to Galway Uke Fest, and it's important for me because I'm an Irish citizen myself. My dad's born in Belfast, and finally I've got my Irish passport now, so I've got the freedom to travel around Europe. And it was really important.
Ones, Mark.
I am one of the lucky ones. I'm sorry to all my British friends who can no longer tour without visas. But yes, so I played this festival and I had such a wonderful weekend there. And I was in a town and in a country that I never really been to before. And I was seeing banners across the place with my face on. It was one of those, again, imposter syndrome, which one of these things and not
real
like the other.
Experience, yeah.
It was so strange, but I had an amazing time there, and I absolutely loved Galway and just how I felt during that weekend. And I wrote a song about how I want to kind of go back there, and it's just my favorite one in terms of the journey it takes you on. It's called City Bells. I step off the plane, breathe the wind of a land I've never been. Swap the air for the rounds, the fields racing behind my screen. For the chords of the ocean breeze, voices that remind me of a forgotten home. For the buzz in the center, decorated with banners and posters, with my face on. Those city bells, they call me, and at the time I determined to want to leave. I've left behind stones that are unturned, and faces who wait for my return. I felt the nightlife in the fourth of a Latin kind, with a pint in my hand, dancing to the buskers outside. Flags of 1,000 nations, the colors breathe air into the cobblestones below. People of 1,000 nations have walked these streets, foreigners welcomed as one of their own. Those city bells, they call me. At the time I determined to want to leave. I've left behind stones that are unturned, and friendships who wait for my return. The crowded bar is silent, just absorbing the band and the good company. I didn't need to outrun my luck, feeling so at peace with the music playing next to me. Hear the turn of a new day, take a stroll along the boardwalk. Alone at the beach are my footprints and I, and the greatest smile I laid my eyes on. Those city bells, they call me. At the time I determined to want to leave. I've left behind stones that are unturned, and I can't wait till I return.
All right, Mark. So here's the ultimate question: where can we find the album?
You can find Cartoon Physics wherever you buy or steal your favorite music. It's available on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes if you still download. If you really feel generous and want to support me directly, you can go to marcgallaghermusic.bandcamp.com where you can download it, and that supports me a bit more. That's mainly where you can find my stuff. I have a Patreon where you can get various perks for mainly like my solo covers, but also if you do join my Patreon, you get a free download of the EP.
There you go. And you get to directly support an artist instead of going through a massive streaming platform that pays them 0.0003 cents per stream, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and joining me. I'm really excited to get more people hopefully listening to this record because I'm really enjoying it. If you wouldn't mind, could you just give us a little exit music to get us out of here?
Yeah, absolutely.